Okay, Barry, you're saying that the betting shop's obviously a lot different from the on-course business. A couple of things I'm interested in. You've got multiples to deal with, and you've got football bets like you talked about, which you had to pay extra for the privilege of taking. If somebody comes in with a Yankee or something, at what point do you start to think, right, I better start hedging this?
Generally, we had a policy: don't hedge. I might have told you in the last interview I worked for a guy that when betting shops were first introduced in the early 60s, don't hedge. They can't win, the punters. And I tried to have that in my brain, and he became very successful not hedging. But all of a sudden, different things started. They come up with tricks. These punters are tricky people, you know. They come up with tricks that I'd never ever thought of. They had this thing that going 3 times one winner if you do some sort of 4 horses in a Yankee or something, and if you only get one winner, you get 3 times.
Lucky 15.
Is that what it's called?
Lucky 15, yeah.
Lucky 15s. I thought, what mugs they are like, you know what I mean? Anyway, I started taking them, and all of a sudden, I weren't winning on them. I said, why aren't we winning on these then? They said, they had one winner, it was 7 to 2. The time 3 times come up, it covers the stake. You only have to have one winner and you cover the stake, don't you? Oh, don't like the sound of this too good. And I kept wanting 2 to win and not 1. But they get a double up and they still don't lose. And the punters ain't that mad. They're tricky people, them punters. So I wasn't keen on them anymore. And when the same faces keep coming in, putting on a similar bet, you have to think there's something in it, don't you? Like, you know what I mean? As I said, they're tricky people, these punters.
What about these football coupons? Must be like money from America when they come in and have 10 quid, 15 matches, all home wins and that. But is there any sort of defence against somebody having a really lucky day and sort of putting you out of business?
No, there ain't any defence, truthfully. You just got to grin and bear it, like, you know what I mean? Once again, the lessons I was learning when I was very first in the game, that punters can't win. You've got to believe, well, they must have been mugs, like, I mean, fancy. I wouldn't want to pick 2 winners, I pick 10 winners, but it did only happen once, fortunately, out of the short time I was in the business, betting shops. Geezer had a tenner come to £54,000, and I thought, well, I ain't going to earn £54,000 out of this if I live to be 100, and so I was disillusioned with it all, quite truthfully. Disillusioned with the whole thing about betting shops. What did my old mate Banksy say? They're money factories or something. There might have been money factories, John, back in the 60s, but I'm not sure in the year 2000, so they are the same. So I couldn't. When they offered me the money, they offered me William Hill, which was chuck $500,000 for the shop. But yeah, trying to be out of this, Barry. Your ambitions, state of the thing, you know, on course, face to face with punters, betting them, paying them out after the race. End of story. Finished, business done. And so that's how I got out of that.
Okay, now you, obviously, we're back on course, you're known for being on course. Now, one of the things that used to fascinate me when I first started as a little floor man, which is bookmakers would be all doing the business and you'd hear, Barry, to win $3,000. And it's a punter and you see no money changing hands. Now, how often did you put up with that, down with a ring, pay after?
Well, unfortunately, some of the bigger shots expect it, don't they? They think they're shown that they're a big style by getting credit bets and ring bets or whatever you want to call them. And so, yes, what do I get knocked for? Less than $100,000, but probably near $100,000 with people that see, they get into you, don't they? They play cash. They're doing 100, 200, 300 on the day. Last race, yeah, Barry, I'm skint. can I have 100 quid on this favourite? I'll pay you tomorrow. What do you say? No? You're going to lose a good punter? You let the good punter on, it wins or loses. When it loses, they bring the 100 quid tomorrow and pay straight away for the first racer. But the same day, they're always wanting credit before the last race again. Then it becomes sometimes after the first race they want credit. And you have to learn. Eventually I got knocked for, as I say, substantial amounts, 35 grand one person. And 17 another. The whole lot didn't come to 100 grand, so I was pleased I was out of it. But even then, you still had to get, what do? You want JP McManus to put up 60 grand to give me? Or 80 grand, or whatever it is? The big rollers, they just expect it, don't they? And I fell into the trap like everybody else does, and eventually getting squeezed into a position where I had to give them the credit.
But do you think if you hadn't given the credit, you'd come, did you still show a profit on top of it ultimately?
Yes, I was still showing a profit, and would still be showing a profit out of the punters that knocked me. But it's part of the game, isn't it, on course, that how many bookmakers aren't owed by punters? Not many. Like, there's plenty that are at small amounts, 2 quids, 5 quids. Like, they turn up with all sorts of silly stories. He turned up before the first race, but I left me cash behind Barry. Can I bet on credit today? I said, no, I'll leave off, Barry. You know me. I'm good. Everybody's good, aren't they? You know me. I'm all right for the money and whatever. But no, it's the wrong thing to do, but you can't get out of it. It happens.
Okay. Now you mentioned earlier that profit margin is everything, or percentages. Should it, obviously, you come from having to really struggle in the poor pitches to being in the prime pitches. Should a bookmaker always bet to figures?
Yes. You've got to have figures on the board, otherwise you're giving it away. Listen, you can get away with laying 10 to 1 and even money chance on one race, can't you? But long term, over the year, you will lose, as you know. You've got to try to bet the figures always, which means if you're caught up in a 2-horse race and you have laid 4 to 5 one of them and the other one's evens everywhere, if you've laid a substantial bet or more than you would care to stand it for, you can never move the other one off of evens ever, regardless. Like, the 4 to 5 chance might become evens at some stage. Then you could go back if you wanted to and lay evens the other one. But if you panic as soon as you've laid the bet and you pull the other one, you're in trouble. You must not pull horses. I can't remember the name of the bookmaker. There was somebody bought me, called him dartboard. Did you ever hear the expression?
No.
He went round the clock laying the horses. Just kept laying and pulling and laying, pulling and laying and pulling and laying. He said, look at the book. He said, everything loses. I said, I wonder why. And percentages are the end of the game. And the same as far as I was talking earlier on about profits. If you're going to go and turn over £4,000-5,000 a day, you can gross 10% and finish up after expenses earning over 5%. But unfortunately, 5% of 5 grand is 250 quid, isn't it? And that's what I was talking about earlier, what your ambitions are when you go. When I was turning over 50 grand, my gross profit was only 6%. And expenses were 4%. But I was netting 2% of £50,000, which is worth having, isn't it? And so I was always very, very aware of margins that we was betting to. And if a race didn't suit me, sometimes just for the fun of it, I'd shorten everything in the race. And then there's an influence on the punters. They suddenly start rushing into different horses, thinking those ones are going to shorten, trying to get an edge into what horses I think the punters actually want. But listen, I like everybody. I fell on occasions of horses, but I was prepared to stand it as opposed to murder myself to get out of trouble on it. And not many bookmakers nowadays. Not many bookmakers go to the race courses expecting to stand horses for thousands of pounds, do they? In my mind, it was normal to stand the favourites for £2,000 or £3,000 every race. That was normal. So that helps you in as far as much that when you've laid a 600 to 4 and it goes to 5 to 4 or 11 to 10, you carry on trading as best as you can, and then suddenly hopefully another horse is backed in a race. It gives you a chance, but when you're only turning over 300, 200, 300 pound a race, 500 pound a race, there's no room to fall, is there? You're dead once you've laid the wrong price. You're dead, and so they still make a profit, I believe. Otherwise, they wouldn't keep coming out. But the whole scene's changed in Simon in the last year or two. I'm not sure how many milkmen and window cleaners we've got on the course now. Like 30, 40 years ago, it was a secondary trade, wasn't it? On-course bookmaking.
Taxi drivers,
you got it. Window cleaners, insurance salesmen, night watchmen. You just mentioned somebody, I will mention it now, shall we? There used to be a laugh about our mate Roger Barton. He said he was a fishmonger up at Billingsgate Market, up at 3 o'clock every morning. Went and done his business at the courses, then up past 6, 7 o'clock. They say Roger went round, put this in because he liked this, I'll tell the story about him. He went round all the, what haven't you sold, what you got left I can have cheap. And he'd buy up all the stock that hadn't sold cheap, pack it all up, and he had 100 restaurants he'd call on the way home from work and sell it to them. And get in at 3 o'clock in the afternoon, go to bed for 2 hours, then get up and go to Romford Dogs and work Romford Dogs till 11 o'clock. Then he had a night watchman's job, sitting around in a warehouse looking after a thing, and he'd sit around there till 3 o'clock next morning until he could go back to work again. Great character, Roger Bard.
Yeah, I've had the pleasure of interviewing Roger at Romford. He's certainly a character.
Yeah.